Míle buenas.
Good luck.
Thank you so much. Constáisiom goléir constáisiom bhór céad míle fáilte roimh an sa an jobh. Thank you so much, all of you, for coming here. So go háide tá sibh ag cailúint mhór loin tuige mé sin. You're losing your lunch at the moment, so I understand that. Nílach dachad chuig nóid te goin. Nílach am réasúnta geara goin agus bhrealam a lán a chlúdach san am sin. Mar sin bara goin tosnú. So we only have this short amount of time, so I'd love to start this thing. Is toch in chéadrod gegartam rá ná cúpla focail faoi ma bhailce sí a phlé. To just speak a little bit about my clothes. Seo báín, so seo an seacéid tradiisiúnta de Ileán Áire, den hioscarí Ileán Áire. So it's a traditional Aran Island of Galway, those Aran Islands, traditional fisherman's jacket. Agus si seo hiad na brístin on the trús a bheith ioscarad an tort. These are the trousers that a fisherman would have worn. Nis níli mi de déna brédín lá bhéanta in Gaiileh I Hille, so ha si seo taca ó tíar chonol, agus an son dúras de diné an telí of the fúáil in Gaiileh. So, unfortunately, we're no longer hand-weaving tweed in Galway anymore, so these are hand-woven in Donegal and then sewn up. Ach, is doch an rud gabhailm phléileh in jobh, an ábhar atá faoi cheabad le goin ná mar a derm rewilding the mind. The thing what I want to look at is rewilding the mind. How can we engage with the mind in a less logical, in a less rational way? Agus go háide be mise a fechantar seo trí súla nó trí dearcha na héireann. Ach na ríide déat fí é seo thógant ó éon raic, ó éon tango, éon chultúr dáhain. So I'll be looking at this today from an Irish perspective. But in truth, we could take any old culture, any traditional or rooted culture around the world, have the same ways of connecting to the land. Agus so bháin go bhrealam, ná go bhfuil irid sin goléir go bhfuil siad bunathe tuiscint agus ólis na sínsir. So many of them are rooted on the knowledge of those who went before, the ancestors, the forebears. Agus mar sin níor bhailí mar riamh sa seomra seo hana, us as a crowd. We've never gathered in a group like this before. And as we know from the cultures all around the world, and particularly Ireland too, that it's not just us here, that our ancestors are with us. And often, it's said that they're standing behind us. And often the women might be on our left-hand shoulder, the men on our right hand. And a group of us who are kind of, neurodivergent, as was shown in the first plenary session, we all share that. Anyone at this conference is all somewhat sort of edgy and marginal in the way we're thinking. We might have the same ancestors bumping into each other. And they might have come into this room, into this conference site a few days earlier, knowing we'd be here. So, an chéadrod go bhrealam déanamh ná beidir ahantas ó thuairt dóibh. First thing I'd love is maybe if we could all sort of recognize, acknowledge those. So, a bheitimish gléir seasamh, could we stand up for a second? I know you've just sat down, but could we stand up for one split second? Agus tám chun ire oribh mhór an nál a haringt sí chuide in íoga chéile. I'd love to ask you, if we breathe in 3 times in a row, and that's sort of double breath, So, okay, Jenny chi huide. We'll do it 3 times. So, if it here. If it do. If it chi. Yeah. Agus bhailam beidir chuma antas uirt an dalmh faoin argosa. I'd love also that we acknowledge or maybe just announce ourselves to the land beneath our feet. Agus an si go bhfuil sé sin nasca leis sin áhan, agus na sin, agus an cnoc, agus na sléite mór timpeolaring. Like that breath obviously was cleansed by trees in this area. So maybe we'll also announce ourselves to the trees, to this great river that runs through Oxford, to the hills, through the land. Agus an si gan enemy de sin, ná go dermid dar anam, agus an son go sotlómid an dalmh tíhuide in íoga chéile. So the way of doing this maybe is we'll say our name, like Ismisha is I am in Irish. So Ismisha Manachán, I am Manachán, and then stamp our foot. So you go Ismisha and then your name and stamp our foot. Okay? So we'll do a hean do chi. 1, 2, 3 or do a hean do a chi. Ismisha Manachán. Gdíar ar fad. Okay, sig. Sing go hean na gwili meet and suffer now so. Everybody understands. So an art Anoit go snow meat. No, the way of understanding of beginning, and I wish I could do this whole thing in Irish, but I know there's 45 minutes, so I'll probably go into English for most of it. The way of understanding Ireland, at least, is so much, it's composed within the name. It's within the name Ireland. Ireland, Eire. Eire. Eire is this goddess, this sovereignty goddess of the land. And the thing we know about sovereignty goddesses, they're a thing that are shared by the Indo-European speaking people. In other words, those people who learned how to farm over where Eastern Europe meets Western Asia. 4,500, 5,000 years ago. We learned how to tend cattle. We learned how to grow grain there. And the sovereignty goddess was goddess basically who represented the abundance and the fertility and the spiritual strength of a land. And in Ireland, at least, Éireann as a goddess, it's said that she's the daughter of Mac Géna, of the son of the sun. Or also in the Banshánachas, the lore of the wise women, she's known as just the wife of Unrian itself, of the sun itself. Yeah. We also that she's of Lu, married to Lu, the great god of light, of fires, in Lund, well, possibly Lundunum, but definitely Lyon, this sort of Celtic god. But more interestingly, her foster father was Cuddle the Round-Breasted. Okay, so if we are trying to get a rooted sense of the land by looking at the mythology, what does something like Cuddle the Round-Breasted tell us? So cuddle is an Irish word today. It means cuttlefish. So a squid is cuddle maida, basically a fingered cuttlefish. And the one thing we know about the cuttlefish or the squid, even from my octopus teacher, is that they're shapeshifters. They can camouflage their skin. They can change their bodies. So we're descended from this squid, the round-breasted squid. And in so many native traditions, there is this idea that people come from a shapeshifter, from the soil, from the wind, from an animal, from the land, who formed itself into different shapes. Now, as I say, it's very hard for us now to get an idea of this in our logical, rational minds. So I turn to AI for it. And obviously AI is a very controversial technology, and I would never use it in one of my books. But it's just a sense, it is at least an alien. It's an artificial but an alien technology. So it sort of gives us a sense. But interesting that Éire as well, it comes from the Proto-Indo-European word verion, which means abundant or fertile. And it's cognate, which means it has the same root as the Sanskrit and the Hindi word pivari, also abundant, fertile. Now, I'm working a lot with Aboriginal people in Western Australia there, and that's Noongar. And the Noongar people of Budjar again means pregnant land, abundant land. It's a concept you find all over the world. The land is a female being who can give abundance, who can give life. So we have this sense, but Ireland is actually three goddesses. It's Éire, Banba, and Fola. And Banba is the goddess of the land before the land had emerged from the sea. And that refers to two things. On one scale, it refers to when Ireland was beneath this kilometre-thick layer of ice. So, England, there have been people in England here for 20,000 years. And for 10,000 of years of that, there was no one in Ireland. It was beneath this kilometre of ice. But there were always some peaks of it that peaked above it. So Banba represents that. The ancestors, the first settlers who came from England, seeing the ice melt, seeing this empty tundra and daring to come, seem to have encoded that knowledge in the mythology. We'll talk a little bit about how that would have passed down for 9,000 or 10,000 years later. But the second understanding of Banba is that obviously the ancestors realised, they saw along the Atlantic coastway or in the Burren that the Atlantic Ocean, the limestone, had all these fossils within it. There was a time where the land was beneath the sea. They had marine fossils in it. So it's a recognition of those two things, that the land once came from beneath the water and then emerged. And ha sé seo go léir darúta again, trí na blianta, an nasc seo again go léir bhí again. So all of this sense that we had of us being from a shapeshifter, from people who emerged first when the water came from beneath the land, was lost. Agus ní oring a bhí an locht. It wasn't our fault. This was like taken purposely from us by different people. And first was the Druids. We can often be very romantic about the Druids. St. Patrick writes a lot about confronting them when he arrives in 430 AD in Ireland. But the Druids are very like the Brahmins. They're this elite force who were the poetic and spiritual guardians of their people. But it was clearly a hierarchical system they were in fact, a patriarchal system. There are a few druidesses, but in Ireland mostly it's a druid. There was a time where Ireland was entirely based on the goddess, on a matriarchal culture. We'll get to that. We'll be very clear by the end of the talk. So these Druidic people were a later group who sort of washed out that sense that actually everything was to do with the land being a female goddess. Everything was to do with the abundancy of that. Agus an son gone down Tháinig na Pádraig, so the Druids came first, and Christianity came, put another layer on top of it, then the Vikings, the Normans, the English. I love how AI represents the English. If I had done it, I would have been biased by that. But AI, I could just wash my hands of it, you know. In anion sin fad, dagach lochran biog bidach la stig de agan in the lina, gorp the chilin in lina. In spite of all of these layers of forgetting, some small flame, some small cellular residue remained that we would remember. There was another story of who we were long ago. And we in Ireland are now beginning to realise that emptiness and to try and fill those gaps. And as I say, whenever you encounter any Indigenous culture, I wouldn't call us Indigenous culture. It's a very difficult, fraught word. But any old culture, they're having to fill in the gaps of what they've lost. So we have actually the first words that were spoken in Ireland called Amergain's prayer, Amergain's prayer. Goes like am gwe am wer am dav shach niren. So I'm the am gwe am wer. I am the gwe, the wind of the sea. I'm dav shach niren. I'm the stag of 7 tines. I'm shauch arail. I'm the hawk of the cliff. It goes through every being. He summons the beings into life. And we thought that was the first words ever spoken on the island. But actually, that's just something from that Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita. Our culture and the Indian culture have so many connections, which is the topic of my book that I brought out about 2 months ago, Brahmins and Brahmins, so many of the same aspects. So that was a later element, this whole male god figure, druidic poet figure, bringing the life, the way to life. Before that, there were these goddesses, one of the great Tuatha goddesses, these goddesses that this culture that existed before these sort of Europeans came to Ireland. And so we're now filling in that with what was the incantational words of those first goddess. And one of the great poet in Ireland, Paula Meehan, with her husband, came up with a new word, May Immel, May Lord, May Éonar. May Immel, I am the edge. May Lord, I am the centre. May Éonar, I am the lone one. May Machnav, I am deep thought. May Crown Knolfassa, I'm the hazel tree of knowledge. I could spend 3 hours talking to you about the hazel tree in Ireland and just blow your minds, but we can't. May Ashter is Diadan, I am the shelter and the journey. It goes on and on and on, in a way of summoning our human connection to the land into being. And the other key thing that you come to is, like in terms of archaeology, you come to the sacred sites of Ireland. And they're all now, in terms of both mythology and archaeology, they have stories about male gods, about Cuchulainn, about Fionn McCool, about these great heroes. And that's what we were taught to believe. But beneath that, there's a whole underlayer. Like in every one, if you mention any great power site in Ireland, there was actually a goddess there. So if it's the Hill of Tara, it was the goddess of Tay. If it's Cruachan, the great central regal place of Connacht, it was Cruacha and Maeve, the goddesses there. Owen Macha, the great regal and spiritual centre of Ulster, it was Macha, obviously the goddess Macha. Il Hill of Ishnach, the very central point of Ishnach. The very navel point, the umbilical point of Ireland, where the axis mundi arises out of the land and then rises up into the 3 dimensions, you know, the beneath land, the land, and above. It is obviously, that's the resting place of Eru, of the goddess. I'll talk a little bit at the end about how we know all this, why I'm just not pulling it out of my arsehole, why it is actually knowledge. As you know, we all in this New Age tradition spend too much time pulling things out of our asshole. But in terms of archaeology, there is an awakening in Ireland in the last 10 years of this wider idea. You know, 10 years ago, archaeologists, or up to 10 years ago, they had to believe that all the old monuments were just death places. They were burial graves, they were burial tombs or cairns. They are now realising that they were ritual sites, that they were ceremonial sites. There was also often bones or cremated remains put into them, but they were far more than that. And so the key archaeological sites in Ireland, if we touch briefly on some of the mythology, the key archaeological sites are these cairns, these passage tombs or passage graves or cairns on top of all the significant hills in Ireland. There's 250 of them. Now, they're not just unique to Ireland, as we know, they're in Scotland, they're in England, they're in Wales, they're throughout Western Europe, even in northern northern Africa. But more of them have been preserved here than anywhere else, preserved in Ireland. And so I think we have a sense of them. They're often a mound on top of a mountain. They're like a pregnant belly on top of a hill or a mountain. And that pregnant belly is composed of gravel or stone. And right at the centre of it will be a chamber, will be a secret chamber, almost like a womb-like chamber at the centre. And there'll be a passageway into that chamber. The chamber's entirely in darkness, except for twice in the year, either the solstice or the equinox, where the morning or the dawn or the sunrise or the sunset light will go down that chamber, illuminating go down the passage, illuminating the chamber at the back. So for all the world, this is like, in every culture in the world, the sun is a male god, except for some Aboriginal cultures where it's female, but every other is male. So, and we know in Irish, in all these Indo-European speaking cultures, the sort of Celtic culture as well, the sun was a male god. So the only way of picturing these passage tombs that are built in a way so that the sun during the equinox or during the solstice will go down the passage is that the male sun rises. He sends his shaft, his phallus, down to the opening, which is often a beautifully decorated opening into the cairn, into the passage tomb, down through, which is like a labia or a vulvic opening, and then down through the chamber, which again is like a vulvar passageway, a vaginal passageway into that womb, illuminating certain decorations and stones on that rock, on those stones. The only time they're ever seen is when they're illuminated by the sun. So the shaft of the male sun goes into the belly of the pregnant woman of the land, impregnates it, and seeds are found in those. Seeds were left in those so that they possibly, presumably, could be fertilized, could be animated, could be brought forth into life. Also, I presume inductees were also put in there to have that spark, that catalyst brought to life. Now, I'm working with the great Aboriginal lore keeper and culture man, Tyson Yunkaporte. And when I show him the rock art, which unfortunately you can't see on that slide here, which is on Lough Crew in Cairn, he reads it. Like, we don't understand. These were built 5,500 years ago, the passage tombs. We don't understand the rock art anymore. But you go to Aboriginal culture, which is, 40, 45, possibly 60,000 years of continuous culture, still understood today, continuous culture. Tyson reads those and he says, I understand those from my people. So we might be just at the very beginning, if we are stopping this categorization, this pigeonholing of us all into different nations, we might be beginning to understand a lot more about our shared culture. My next book that I've written is about links between Ireland and, similarities between Ireland and Aboriginal culture. There can be no direct links, at least rationally, but the similarities are uncanny in some ways. So that's the sun coming down through Newgrange, the most famous and the latest, in other words, the most recent and the most developed of these great cairns. It's all to do with sacral kingship, which is an idea that you find back then 5,500 years ago, seemingly, because how else do you describe these cairns with the sun going down, impregnating it? And you find right up until the 18th, 19th century, it's the idea, that the king represents the sun. And he represents then the people as well, because he's the leader of the people, he's representing the sun, and he is in right relationship, he is in sexual congress, he is in matrimony with the land. So it's vital, in all those cultures, why it says he's vital, he is strong, he is fertile, he is virile. And you find it in Egypt with the sun god Ra. You find in Louis XIV, the great sun king in 18th century France. The Maharajas, I remember in the 1990s going to Rajasthan, and the Maharajas at their coronations having these great phallic symbols, either the trains or the elephants or just a phallus out on show, showing their virility. And the Feast of Tara, the great site of kingship in Ireland, in Leinster, at least in the east of Ireland, it's all about the marriage of the king to the land. It was a global and international concept. It was that we needed to marry ourselves, to totally harmonise, to live in right relationship with the land. Now, I can give you examples of that in Ireland up until the 1940s, the 1950s. And what's so beautiful is the last 10 years, we're now beginning to relight the fires, to redo the ceremonies in places where they were maybe stopped. There's some parts in Ireland where they continue to a small degree right up, but the places where they're forgotten, they're being redone again. And we see that idea of the role of the king beautifully in the word beneath it. So there was the king, the Ri in Ireland, the Raja in India, same word, same idea, same culture. I mean, between the different castes in Ireland, the classes in Ireland, the castes in India, the next layer down was the Ara in Ireland. The Ara was the noble, like Aryan in India, same class, same caste, same word, same concept. The Ara, we still have that word in our government. Instead of minister, the Minister of Finance, we say Ara Aragatus. Ada Ganohiachtacha, the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Ada, every school child in Ireland learns, means Tom kun Ada a hort durin agent. Ada means to care for. So the Ada were those people beneath the king who were caring both for the people and the land. They were the custodians. That was the key notion in both our cultures. And so if we know then that the people get their power, is shown through the king from the sun, where does the land get its power come from? Okay, and you just need to ask any native culture around the world. But in Ireland too, the land get its power from the water. Without the water first grinding up the rocks and the stones into gravel and sand, without the water bringing its fertile soils, the rivers from other parts, alluvial soils to other parts, it won't be alive. Without the rain coming down, the land becomes a dry, dusty desert. And it was the same in Ireland. Everything was about the goddess, it was about the goddess of the river. And in Ireland, every single river in Ireland has a feminine name. You know, Irish has masculine or feminine. Every single river is a feminine, except one. There's one masculine name, a river down in Cork. It's called Tulan or Sulan. And Sulan means small, insignificant thing or stream of urine. Stream of piss. That's the only otherwise they're all. And as I said, you know, there's the colloquy of the sages, this great gathering of the wisdom of Irish. It says that the bank of a body of water was a place where knowledge was always revealed for poets. Again, that's no great shakes. We know nor ha mi dis shasav sa hiel folke nor vroch na hauen gedagen tishkenti ni schrein na chuing. We know that when we're standing in the shower or on the bank of a river, beliefs come to us, understandings come to us. They knew, as we do today, that rivers have power, have potency, have energy. Beautifully, so many of the rivers are actually just goddesses. So the Boyne River, when we talk about the Bandon River in Cork is from Bandon, it means Bandia, woman. The Ban River in Northern Ireland is again Bandia, goddess. The Boyne River, in the most sacred river in Ireland, that and the Shannon, both are goddesses. Boyne is interesting, the Boyne River, because Boyne means white cow. It's actually transparent cow. White, fair, as in Fionn McCool. Fionn, our great hero, was white, he was fair, but he was transparent, really, is what's getting at. He was able to see through the veil. He was able to access the knowledge on the other side. So the Boyne means the cow who can access the knowledge on the other side. Okay? Now, the exact same god is in India as Govinda. Bo-Inda in Ireland, Govinda in India. Go means bow. Go is the Sanskrit or the Hindi, or Gao or Go, Sanskrit or Hindi for cow. Bo in Irish is the cow. Vinda means finder or seeker of knowledge. So Govinda is the cow, is the finder or seeker of knowledge. Bo-Inda in Ireland is the cow who can access knowledge. Same gods, same culture. There are no borders. This idea of, you know, in the 19th century idea of nationalism, the first thing, as everyone in this conference knows, is we get over those concepts. A beautiful example that's still spoken about today in Ireland of the wisdom of rivers is that if someone falls into a river, if someone drowns in a river, what you did is you took the last sheaf of the corn, of the grain, you put it on the river at night, and you put a candle burning on it. And that sheaf went down with the candle down the river and would bring you to the dead body. The people were in harmony with the rivers. The mythology is just full of stories of the community and the river working together. In the Toynbee Culna, the great epic story about a cattle raid, just as the Mahabharata, the great epic story of India, is also about a cattle raid at its core, tells of this idea of the great river in the Cooley Peninsula swelling to stop the Queen Maeve's army coming up. We were in right relationship with our rivers, and so it worked for both. I don't have time to get into the goddess of the river. What I'd love to do is for us to, we won't, but to stand up and just think where our sacred river is in relation to us. Every person long ago would have known where, and it could be a stream, whatever river or stream or watercourse feels right to them. are particularly the wells. There's been such a rise in Ireland over the last 10 years of young people, particularly women in their 20s and 30s, seeking out the old wells. These are like these acupuncture points of how to engage deeper. So if we do want to find a way of how to rewild our minds, how we can get into deeper connection with the land, I'd say first go to those archaeological sites. The sites that are either Bronze Age, 3,000-4,000 years old, Neolithic, 5,500 years old. They were positioned in these spots. And somehow all of our forebears down the years have managed to bring them down to the present day. They're power places. Dírach sa chans gymech hawn mar seo, gymech galo, gymech an sian olas cailte, gus gymech horing dollar ash cuha, gus dolling lech lo harish. They were placed there just in case there might come a time like now, where we might have forgotten a lot, where we would have to reconnect with that wisdom, that understanding, that sense our forebears have. So we go to those sacred monument, archaeological sites, we go to the rivers, we go to the wells, the potency of a well. And there's a great lore keeper. We first need to understand how to relate to the well. There'll often be a rock or a holy tree connected to them. And we know then what is the ritual? How do you go about the well? You always go deshel first, always sunwise, always respect the direction. You find where the burning star, the centre of our solar system is, and then go in right relationship with that sun. Everything in the Irish language is about this right relationship with the sun. But I said Owen the Bardún is the great cultural lore keeper of the Mincéiri, of an Lucht Siúl, of the travellers. Lucht Siúl means the walking people. The travellers in Ireland. And for him, he says, the settled people will have a very different relationship with wells. They go to one well and they build up a relationship with that. And he says, you don't just go to a well and ask something of it. No, you go there and first get to know the well. Maybe do something for the well. You clean it up, you take back some of the brambles, you just sit with the well. And then after you've got to know it over a few times and brought something to it and given it love, then maybe you ask something of it. But whereas the settled people will have a connection with one single well, the travellers will have a connection with many. So Owen the Bardún showed me this bracelet he had knitted, he had sort of plaited himself. And he said he had dipped that into 14 different wells. It had the combined energy, the combined essence of 14 different wells within it. It was this nexus, this matrix of power, all from the wells of Ireland, and also he travels through England, combined in it. The understandings that the travelling people have within their language, within their culture, within their way of relating to the land is so powerful for all of us to go back to understand. As I said, it's only in the last 3 years that I've begun to work with Indigenous people in Canada, in the States, in Australia. And again, it's just because I happened to give a talk in Edmonton, in Alberta. And these Cree elders, Jerry Saddleback, Joanne Saddleback, Leah Whiskey Jack, Lewis Cardinal, came to me. And they said, we hear what's happening in Ireland. We hear how you're on the very margins of Europe and how you've kept some of the European traditions alive. You've kept some of the Indigenous traditions alive. And I said, no, we cannot call ourselves Indigenous. I said, the Irish wiped out the native people of Argentina. The Irish set up the Indian residential schools in Canada that did so much destruction, that made sure my friends in the Tsleil-Waututh, in the Musqueam, in the Cree, in the Blackfoot had so much of their culture taken away from them. But Lewis Cardinal said to me, he said, we don't have time for that shit anymore. He said, we need to get over all that and move on. Again, one man, Jerry Saddleback, who said another idea, because if you're asking, how did we get all this information still today? We have it in two ways. One, it's passed down in the oral tradition. O bhéal go béal, siad na glóinte, sna gaeltachtaí in iarthar na héireann. So in one way, it's passed down. O glóin go glóin means generation to generation. But glóin actually means your knee. So it's grandparents' knee to grandchild's knee, grandparents' knee to grandchild's knee. Unbroken in the Gaeltacht, in the Irish-speaking areas in Donegal, in Galway and Kerry. The very margins, the area that the English just didn't get. You know, the great Cromwell phrase is to hell or to Connacht. He either killed you or you moved to this western area. And we kept the old lore alive. Not only for the 2,500 or 3,000 years the Irish has been spoken, But as I said, I could show you examples that shows the wisdom and the knowledge, the understandings that are in the Irish language that's way older than 3,000 years. This is a knowledge that goes back, but then took on the Irish language at some point, 2,500 or 3,000 years ago. But it's there, and of course also the Christians, the monks, in their mystery, in their majesty, in their great gratitude, decided to write down all the old knowledge of the Shanacha, of the storytellers, of the old lore keepers, in the 9th, 10th, 11th century in manuscripts. We don't know why they did it. We don't know what bias they might have put on it. But we're so grateful. Like, Irish is one of the oldest cultures that has this literary language. We only learned writing when St. Patrick came in the 5th century. But somehow they recorded that knowledge that goes thousands of years back. So we have it both in oral form and in literature form. But it was Jerry Saddleback who says, I says to him, he knows the 21-day creation myth of his people. It takes 21 days and 21 nights to say. And I says to him, Jerry, I says, so he's from the Musquechies Reserve, the Salmon Cree Reserve outside Edmonton. I says to him, how can you remember 21 days, 21 nights? How can you not forget? How come does it not become like Chinese whispers? And he says, Manchán, I can't forget, he says, because I can only tell the story when I'm out in the land. Okay? So he says, every single line of the land is connected with a particular river, a particular rock, a particular direction of the wind, a particular direction of the sea. It is a choreography between him and the land. And in the same, when I talk to Irish people about that, I say, every one of you in this room knows a line or two of Irish poetry, of Irish old ancient poetry or mythology. Just think about what you know about Irish mythology, even Welsh or Scots or Scottish mythology. There is a place name mentioned in every second line. They are rooted, knitted into, encoded into the land, the knowledges. It's almost like a form of songlines. You walk the land, you imagine the land, you tell the stories, and it comes back to you. That's why the second book after 32 words for Field was called Listen to the Land Speak. Tá sé go léir ann, tá sé fitte fóite, tá sé nasca le stig don dalamh. Ní gá dóinge ach dul ar aiscigh na háitne seo, agus tucha sí chuin, diag ar níag. All of the old knowledge, the old wisdom that our ancestors wanted us to remember for these times of loss, these times of confusion, it's in the land. We just need to sit with it. And it's an uncomfortable thing to do, particularly for someone like me, born in 1970, who's so in the mind, who's so not in the body. I mean, you look at me, you can see I've been a priest for every fucking incarnation back, you know? I mean, you should see my girlfriend. She's so rooted. She understands I'm the speaker of this stuff, but I'm bullshit. I don't know it. They feel it, you know? And I said more and more in Ireland, it's these young people, often mostly women in their 20s and 30s, they can feel it, whereas I can just think it, you know? But it's there. It's there. We just need to allow that time. I need to allow the time to shut my brain off and to feel it. Yeah. That's just a summation of where we get the old knowledge of if we want it. And once we have some relationship to the knowledge, the next step is to get an understanding of her, of the Cailleach. The Cailleach is almost beyond talking about. There's no way we could sum up the Cailleach. The Cailleach is the representative of the land before she was even land. The Cailleach is always saying, I am older than everything. I am older than any conception you have of the land. She's always saying that before the land ever was created, she was there. She's also the power force behind the seasons. It's stronger, actually, this concept in Scotland than in Ireland. It's died out to a degree in Ireland. So she is the one who in November brings in the gales and the storms that strips back the verdancy, that strips back the life, brings back the destruction, the demise, the death of life, and the sun going beneath the horizon for long periods of the day. And then, of course, she transforms herself at Imbolc, on the 1st of February, into Bridget. Briganti, the Sanskrit word also Briganti, this the new flame, the new seed, the new spark. She is the Cailleach, related to the Kali in Hindu culture. In Hindu culture, the Kali, the Cailleach, destroyer, or Durgad also. Then into Briganti, the Bridget, Saint Bridget, and then back into in Bealtaine, the full force of the mother producing food abundance. It's never dualistic, you know. I think it's always. Even when I'm saying, the Druids were patriarchal before there was matriarchal, that's rubbish too. That just shows my own small-minded thinking. It's everything. It's not dualistic. It's not either or, you know. But I love how the Cailleach, she says, Dúr, and this is Old Irish from like 5th to 8th century, but I can still understand it. Every school child can understand it. Why? Because so little development happened in Ireland. Nothing changed. We can still understand our language from the 5th century. A time where, anyway, where English wasn't even, spoken, hadn't even been invented. Dúr van farige war, the time when the big sea, glass, it was in a green, hilly forest. Vi mishim vorni nog, I was a young woman. So it was pre-Pangean, before the Atlantic, before the Appalachian Mountains had split from the west coast of Ireland and created the Atlantic, she was young. And there's so many stories of her creating the potent sites of the land by dropping stones from her apron. There's a lovely thing. She's also the goddess of foraging. She's always saying, this is where you'll get the best herbs, the best berries. She's so specific about the type of berry, the type of herb, the type of animal, the type of shellfish, and where to get them. But via me of Maidin Dom, my wholesome morning food used to be Dillis Clochanair agus Kshav unsco, and the dulse and the wild garlic. Kshav, Dullis Clochanair, the dulse or the seaweed of Lochanair, and Kshav, the wild garlic of Sco. The place you find the Cailleach today is in a place called the hill of Sliabh na Cailí, or the Loch Crew, which is just about 12 minutes from where I live. And actually, I moved there 27 years ago. And it was, I think I mentioned it, Stumpy, isn't it? No, I get that his name. That road protester in England, what was his name? Swampy, poor Swampy. It was Swampy, and people who knew Swampy, who'd been part of the road protests in England. I was there in 97. They were coming, totally disillusioned, to Ireland a few years after Thatcher's death, with looking to these places. We had forgotten about them. It was the road protesters from England. They're often blamed for being angry, for being anti, for being on the dole, but actually they kept some of the lore alive, particularly the women among those that we didn't remember. But they were the ones when no one in Ireland, around 97, and that's unfair, there was the women lore keepers, there were some powerful women. But anyway, Hill of Ishnach, the hill, Sliabh na Cailí, the hill of the hag, of the goddess. And the central place on that is that the throne, the chair of the hag's chair. If you sit on that, directly north of you is the pole star, 323 light years away. It was positioned there to be directly that. You look east, and you're looking directly at the cairns of the River Boyne, at these passage tombs in the River Boyne. You look west, you're looking at the passage tombs of Sligo. They were built like this. They were built into the landscape to have these great accesses. And just so that we'd be aware, in case there was a time where we might forget that, the name of the Cailleach here is Gad of Og. The only other place you find that Gad of Og is in Sligo. It's the name of the wild little river that goes through Sligo, which is exactly the direction that this rock, that this chair pictures, points if you look west. So there's a sun alignment. Again, in the 60s and 70s, there were hot statues had fibre. Good. 5 minutes left. We got to wipe this up now. Well, I will wrap this up. What was I going to say? Yeah, in the 60s and 70s and 80s, New Agers were constantly finding sun alignments everywhere, and they were all a bit vague. But there's a whole new study of astroarchaeology with great with exactitude, and they're finding there is a direct alignment between the Cailleach Beara's house, which is a cairn on top of Sliabh Gullion in County Armagh, that goes the sunrise on the summer solstice, that goes directly through the cairn on top of Loch Crew, and then goes also through the stone, the umbilical stone at the centre of Ireland, the Hill of Ishnach. These were composed to make sure that we understood that everything in the landscape is connected. There's nothing isolated. There are all these matrices. If you stand on Ishnach, the centre point of Ireland, there are direct alignments down to Sliabh na Magan in Tipperary, to Ard Éireann in Sliabh Blooms, to Acraham, the central spiritual and king site of Connemara. The whole place is an alignment that, as I said, isn't the imagination of some egotistical man with a ruler or something else. They're proven. They're there. It's the sun, the burning sun at the centre of our solar system, are tying these up. For us, what we need to do is just go out into the land and sense them. They're there. The best way, according to all the native indigenous people I'm talking to, is just go out there, do it in the now. We don't need to go back to the old books. We need to engage with them now. to find out. The Cailleach is so interesting in that she emphasises the whole time that she has forgotten all of this too. She comes from a time of great power, but she's given that away. It's either to the Druids, the male Druids, or the Christian church. She says, "Aminican mar ur dum, I am cold indeed. Ceach doracha is erchede. Every acorn is doomed to decay." That's back to the acorn in the haze. Well, anyway. Ir fesh fri chandev sorochav. After feasting by bright candles, be in norachav dir hege, to be in the darkness of an oratory. We're in that darkness of the oratory now, but the answers are still there. They're all through the land. They're even in the words that we have, in the place names, in the stories, but even in the words for the female body. So last year, I had a book out called Focal Naman, which was 80 words for the vagina or the vulva in Irish. Now, there's hundreds of words for menstruation. There are hundreds more words. This was just a spark for women in Ireland to go into the Gaeltacht, into the Irish-speaking area, and to ask them, because they've never been recorded. They're there, but they've never been recorded. But even the words, the simple words that you might find in a dictionary, like Blain Mana means a vagina, it means a woman's cove or a cave. Gowel Mana, another word for vagina, means an estuary or the piece of water when it comes between two peninsulas or two tongues of land. Clash is another word for vagina, also means a mound or a ridge or a gully. Mota or bota means a pubic mound, but also a bank, an embankment. The land was seen as the body. And you see it most clearly here, Loch Gur, an amazing place if you're ever in Limerick. Loch Gur is this first that Grange stone circle. Do you see it there? If you're ever anywhere near Limerick City, go to that. I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but your mind, your senses will be blown. But Loch Gur itself, it has this hill at the centre of it. And it's the place of the goddess Anya. An means brightness. It is the warming sun that came from the horizon after the Ice Age. And the pregnant belly rose up. And so that's her pregnant belly in Loch Gur. It was discovered. There were so many offerings to her over thousands of years where there was archaeological done on it. But not only is her belly there, right up the road is Cnoch Anya, where her head is. Cnoch means the head, or the hill, the head really. And then down the road on the Cork-Kerry border is Rá Chiach Anya, the two breasts of Anya. And down the road from that is Más Rawar Anya, the fat thighs or the healthy loins of Anya. The land of Ireland, the land of Munster at least, South Ireland, is actually a representation of the goddess. I would have thought I had to go to Africa, go to South America to have that type of thing. But it's still here in Europe. That connection to the land being this female powerful force is still here. There's an entrancing story about Loch Gur, but I don't have time to tell you it. Well, I will actually. So every 7 years, according to mythology, Anya, the great goddess, removes all the water from the lake and leaves just a central dead tree, a leafless tree. And she sits under that lake as a weakened, wizened, embattled figure, knitting, covered by a green blanket. Yeah? And there's a story that at some point this bucko, this sort of arrogant young male, sees her in her weakened state, the great Anya, and he dares take away, he's on horseback, and he dares take away the green mantle, and he rides away with it. And the minute he does so, Anya comes back into her full power again. And she brings all the water back into the land. And she says, Chut, avoin yavalov, oh, curse you, you dumb fool. O warkach na ti, o man na mir tir marav, O you rider from the land of the dead women. Odach an vrat oinia dem vahasa, who kidnapped the vrat oinia, the green blanket from my palms. I think it's a sign that we might think nature is weakened, is lowered, that we can actually have our way with her, that we can actually exploit her. But at any moment, she can bring herself back to her full power again. I don't have time to talk about sacred trees in the landscape. What's interesting, though, is that, you know, you go to Wales and you'll find a tree that's okay. Let's not do it. I've talked to you about that before in the end. I will. So you go to England, you go to Wales, 180 kilometres across the border from Dublin, you will find trees, sacred trees, Billy, the sacred tree that was the centre of all culture. That is 100, that can be 3,000 years old. You come up to Scotland, you find sacred trees that are 5,000 years old. There's none of those in Ireland, because those colonising forces knew our power was in the trees. They knew they had to cut down the trees. On some of the great landlord estates, you'll find a tree, the Carol oak or the giant, the king oak, which are 400 years old. The power was in the trees. So we do need to begin this process of reforestation, which is why I'm on the board of Home Tree, the biggest land reforestation and Atlantic rainforest charity in Ireland. I'm on the board of the Rivers Trust, the first Irish ambassador, because the rivers and the trees need to be brought back. So all I can say is that none of these books are for sale here. They're all available on my website and they sell them to England for the same price. 4 copies of my book, 32 Words for Field, are up in the bookshop, but they're going to go. Leshin Mavila Buechas, thank you so much for that.